threat to our democracy is white supremacy and white nationalism.
The senator from Alabama is wrong, wrong, wrong.
It comes from one thing. This is not complicated.
This issue of transportation is...
We are going to talk more about this whole white nationalism versus white supremacy. Are they the same thing? Definitions say no, they're not, but we'll talk about it and have an interesting discussion. Also, a micro-Kamalaism coming through in the transportation world. Is infrastructure socialism? According to Mayor Pete, maybe. And also, John Kerry talks about climate change again. All that coming up on this episode of Daily Call Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Jobob. Daily Call Live starts right now.
Here we go!
Might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Call Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today it is Wednesday, July 12th, year of our Lord 2023. Hope you're having a great day. I'm going to ruin it by some somewhat complex, somewhat nuanced, but also somewhat just conversation about this whole white nationalist thing. We covered it extensively yesterday, but apparently it got enough attention from the mainstream media that they could just jump all over this whole thing, trying to play the race card yet again. Which is just and by them playing the race card, meaning that, conservatives are racist. All right. I feel like, and I've mentioned this before, that we should just roll our eyes at this point because they're diminishing actual racists. There are probably actual racists in this country. But when you call everybody and everything racist, it minimalizes the effect that that word has on actual racists, which is a problem. But this whole idea of what is white nationalism and white supremacy. Now, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I did a little bit more of a deep dive digging into what the origin of the term white nationalism comes from. I have a really interesting dictionary definition, which I would like to point out just to prove a point. But the bottom line at the end of the day is that the war on language and the war on words and what they mean continues throughout the United States of America. I don't want to try and repeat myself from yesterday, but I want you to watch a couple of these clips from senators, from talk show hosts on The View, and many more. Watch this from Chuck Schumer as he talks about the use of the word white nationalism from Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. Check it out.
It's hard to believe that the senator from Alabama has to be corrected again. The senator from Alabama is wrong, wrong, wrong. The definition of white nationalism is not a matter of opinion. White nationalism, the ideology that one race is inherently superior to others, that people of color should be segregated, subjected, and relegated to second-class citizenship, is racist down to its rotten core. And for the senator from Alabama to obscure the racist nature of white nationalism is indeed very, very dangerous.
The problem with the senator's little speech there is that the definition that he gave is not true. Now, there are a lot of people that will argue, well, it's been used this way and that way, and its first use was in the 50s when a group of people said that they were white nationalists, and the KKK has used those words. Okay, I get all of that. I understand that. Here's the problem that I have. The word nationalist is not a bad thing, right? The word supremacy, when you talk about white supremacy and somebody being racist and thinking that one race is superior over the other, that's a bad thing on every side. If you're a I don't know, Hispanic supremacist or a black supremacist, all of the supremacists are bad. The problem is the word nationalist is not a bad term. I'm a nationalist. You should be a nationalist. If the opposite of nationalist is a globalist, yeah, everybody should be nationalists, and we should be horrified and terrified of the globalists. We're understanding definitions here. Now, of course, there are going to be people, and there have been people, and even learned, smart people saying that, well, nationalism, white nationalism is the same thing. It's synonymous with white supremacy. They're the same exact thing. Here's the problem. Those words are not the same thing. Supremacy and nationalist are not the same thing. One could say, or I mean, I would argue, well, then why are you using two different words to describe them? And then the argument there would be, well, several things have the same meaning. Like, for example, a Christ follower and a Christian. Those are two separate words that mean the same thing. So white nationalism and white supremacy could mean the same thing. Well, here's the problem, is those words inherently mean the same thing, a Christian and a Christ follower, or list out your other things that are exactly the same term. But being a nationalist and a supremacist are two very, very different things. You know who caught on to that, interestingly enough? Mitch McConnell, of all people. Watch how Mitch McConnell answers this question from a reporter. Check this out.
Do you have any concern that you have a member of your conference, Senator Tuberville, who seems to have a hard time denouncing white nationalism, especially as it pertains to white nationalism in the military?
Yeah, white supremacy is simply unacceptable in the military and in our whole country.
Yeah, because the words that were being forced upon us are not meaning the same thing. Look, I understand that there has been use of the term white nationalism in very, very bad contexts. I get that. But at the end of the day, what the point I'm trying to make here is that words being foisted upon varying groups of people and words being redefined by people who choose to abolish the meaning of anything is a bad thing for society. Anybody who calls themselves a white nationalist and is extremely racist, or just racist in general, is a problem. I know that. I don't need to be told that. Some people in the comment section, look at this, like Larry says, white nationalist is the same thing as white supremacist. Okay, that's fine if you believe that, but those two words are not the same thing. The word apple and the word mushroom are not interchangeable because they mean different things. Being a nationalist is not a bad thing if you're going to opposite that of globalist. I'm going to stay out of the comments here for a little bit. This from The View, talking about this sort of thing. The View takes on white nationalism. And again, this is in no way, in any way, shape or form, a defense of racist people. This is a look at the words and how they're being used in our society. Check this out from the ever so brilliant Sonny Hostin. Check it out.
The thing is, did he not listen to Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, when he testified that the greatest threat to our democracy is white supremacy and white nationalism, and more importantly, that they have infiltrated law enforcement and the military? These are not, don't come for me on Twitter. These are not my words. These are the words of the FBI agent. And if you are a congressperson, you sat in that hearing and you listened to it.
And you're the head guy making these choices.
Yeah.
This is a BS job, sir.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. First things first, one, you would have to agree with Christopher Wray, which I don't think anybody does. Remember, Joe Biden has said white supremacy is the biggest threat to American democracy. I don't like white supremacy. That's a bad thing. White supremacists are a bad group of people to the extent that they can get organized in any way, shape, or form. But to say that they are the biggest threat to the American democracy is, one, you would have to agree with that. But then again, two, we're conflating two things that do not mean the same thing. Again, I don't want to keep reiterating that this is less about this particular term and more about the broader sense of the idea that you can't just define words how you like them. Some people may point you out to the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of what a white supremacist, a white nationalist is. Let me do that really quick. White nationalist definition. I had this pulled up and it went away. The Merriam-Webster definition of white nationalist: a group of militant white people who espouse white supremacy. Okay, that's what the dictionary definition says. Give me a second. That's assuming that I accept that definition. Also, by definition in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is trans woman, a woman who was identified as a male at birth. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to discredit the dictionary, but if you're going to have that definition of a trans woman is an actual woman who was unfortunately identified as a male at birth, how am I supposed to take the other definition that ideologues and lefties pushed on the society and the culture seriously? We are at a war with words here, and it's a huge problem in the American society and the American culture. Let me see if I can get into some of the comments here, because some of them are really kind of interesting. Jim says, "My name is Jim. I identify as a nationalist." Me too. I am a nationalist. I am not a globalist. Actually, probably speaking, I am a neighborhoodist, and then I'm a cityist, and then I'm a countyist, then I'm a statist, then I'm a nationalist, because local control is the best way to do things. But again, to believe that the best interests in your country is a good thing is not a bad thing. Let me rephrase that in a less clunky way. To say that you want Americans and America to succeed, hence being a nationalist, is not a bad thing. So to insert a race and then the good word and combine them together and then say they're a bad word is ridiculous. I refuse to accept the definition that you foisted upon us. I will condemn racism at every single corner, but you can't just make up things and decide that they're going to be bad. Anything else? Okay, there's some people on my side of the aisle too here that are in the comment section that are not helpful at all. Somebody said, well, we won't get to that. So there's that. Again, I don't want to belabor that too much because we spent a lot of time on it yesterday. But the meaning of words is hugely important when it comes to how you organize a society. If people can't agree on what terms mean, and you solely let the lefty side of the aisle decide what words mean, like affirmative action or dreamers or any of these other floofy terms. Sorry, not affirmative action, affirmative healthcare, dreamers, affirmative healthcare, all of these sort of things that are bad things but have floofy fun names. And now all of these other things that, I don't know, are kind of ambiguous but are now bad because they've named it. If you let the left continuing to define those terms, we will be in a bad place. Moving on here, Pete Buttigieg was on, I believe this is MSNBC, saying socialism is not the worst thing in the world. Just check this out and we'll discuss on the other side. Watch this.
I just wish they would be a little more straightforward and maybe even go so far as to acknowledge that they were wrong when they said that this infrastructure bill was a bad idea. And they were wrong to call it socialism, as evidenced by the fact, or at least wrong to denounce it as socialism and wasteful spending. If it is socialism, then it seems to be socialism that these Republicans love when it's coming their way.
there's really not much to say on this other than the fact that Pete Buttigieg is still trying to push the Biden Build Back Better more infrastructure plan. Remember the $1.2 trillion spending package on mostly lefty nonsense was passed and signed by the president, but at the same time, fortunately, Joe Manchin blocked the Bernie Sanders-esque bill of the $3.5 trillion spending, which some people wanted even more than that, I think up to like $6 trillion in spending. That would only have enhanced inflation, and fortunately, at least one Democrat was like, yeah, this is a bad idea. But Pete Buttigieg here saying that, well, infrastructure spending is not a bad thing, and it's never a bad thing. Yeah, if infrastructure, the term infrastructure is always seen as good. This is another one of these definition things. If you call something infrastructure, generally speaking, in political messaging terms, that has been a good thing. We are pro-infrastructure. Everybody likes infrastructure. But when you add nonsense into what constitutes as infrastructure and say, well, human infrastructure, this money is going to go to paying union bosses, XYZ, whatever it is, then it no longer becomes infrastructure. And Pete Buttigieg resented the fact that that sort of quote-unquote infrastructure was passed along as socialism by his Republican colleagues. That being said, fortunately, that didn't happen and likely won't happen. But another guy who is in the same boat as Pete Buttigieg when it comes to this sort of crap is private jet user John Kerry. Talking about emissions, I'm kind of working my way through these guys fairly quickly because I think we all kind of understand. But just to be aware that they're still pushing this stuff. This is what is it? The climate czar, John Kerry, who flies around on a private jet everywhere and tells everyone they shouldn't drive their car. Check it out.
It comes from one thing. This is not complicated. It is the way we have chosen to propel our vehicles, heat our homes, light our factories and businesses. It's the provision of power, burning fossil fuel without capturing the emissions. We have two choices. You either capture the emissions or you don't create them in the first place. And that's the challenge that we face now.
Does anyone else find that hilarious? The dude, I was in Davos, Switzerland for World Economic Forum in January, which, as I realized that, if you don't have any context, sounds not great. We were there reporting. A couple of my buddies from myself and coworkers from Turning Point USA were there kind of on the streets asking people questions, all of those sorts of things. And John Kerry was there. John Kerry flew halfway around the world on a private jet with him and just a couple other people. I, on the other hand, the climate person who doesn't want emissions, being sarcastic here, flew on a plane with hundreds of other people because I care about the environment also and don't have as much money as John Kerry. But fortunately, he's been able to continue to amass his wealth. I think, is he the one who's married to the Heinz lady? Like he inherited a bunch of money. I think his wife, is that him? Teresa Heinz? Do I remember that correctly? Bunch of catch-up money, which means he doesn't have to abide by any of the emission laws, but says, well, we have to either suck out emissions from the air, which I'm not against that sort of thing, or we need to stop using the machinery that puts emissions into the atmosphere. While having flown to wherever he is on a private jet. So there's that. That's not entirely worth talking anymore about. We have a cocaine update, in case anyone would like to hear about the cocaine update. The cocaine update from the White House is this. Karine Jean-Pierre at the G7, wherever that is. I think they're in Lithuania right now, the president and the president's team. But anyone want to know what happened with cocaine? I would assume cocaine was found in the White House almost 2 weeks ago on Friday. They should catch the person by now, right? That's we all can kind of understand they should catch the person right now, by now. Let's check in with KJP, see who it is that they've caught and what they're going to do to them. Check it out.
Into the cocaine at the White House, the Secret Service indicated if they're closer to.
Yeah, I don't have any updates. As you know, as you just mentioned, Secret Service is under their purview. They're certainly investigating the situation. I just don't have anything updated. I would refer you to the Secret Service on that particular question.
Dang it. I was wrong. Apparently, it's been a week and a half, and the most fortified building in the world cannot catch somebody who left Schedule 1 narcotic in the middle of a workplace in that most secured and fortified building. But maybe they'll get onto it someday. They've already put out the story. What was it, Politico we were talking about last week? We may never catch the cocaine bandit. All right. This is interesting. I just saw this comment while we were going on here. Larry again said this kind of funny thing. Antifa fights against racism and fascism. I do not know if that is sarcasm or not. I don't, Larry, I don't know your act. Appreciate you for watching. But is that sarcastic? Is that satire? And if not, yeah, I'll keep an eye out for comments coming forward, because that seems like a very funny thing to say. But in the meantime, let's get to the Kamala-ism of the day. Wow, we got a lot of videos today. Not sure how that happened. But Kamala, this is a micro Kamala-ism. If you're not familiar with the show, a Kamala-ism. I think we had a Kamala-ism, was it either yesterday or the day before that, of her talking. It's when she repeats words or defines things that, speaking of definitions, defines things that everybody knows all the time. In this instance, this is a microdose of micro-Kamalism. She does the same thing with transportation. Kamala, what is transportation and what does it mean? Check this out.
And I again want to thank the Secretary for your work. This issue of transportation is fundamentally about just making sure that people have the ability to get where they need to go. It's that basic.
Thank you, Ms. Vice President. Transportation is fundamentally about people needing to get places. Wow. I only remember this because I remember listening to it when I was at a place, and I was at that place in March of last year. So March 2022 was, I still think, the best Kamala definition. Not the best Kamala-ism, but the Kamala definition, which she went on Charlemagne the God's podcast, radio show, whatever, and talked about Russia invading Ukraine and defined it as such. If you remember this, Ukraine is a country in Europe, and Russia is a bigger country in Europe as well, and Russia attacked Ukraine. Thank you, Kamala, for that wonderful definition. For those of us who can't think or read or understand what was going on. I'm curious to see if that guy responded back, because I would assume that that was a piece of satire, saying that Antifa fights against fascists and racists. Ryan here, frequent correspondent Ryan, says Antifa are the fascists. Like, yeah. Using physical force to attempt to stop somebody from saying things is textbook fascism. If you'll recall, in March of this year, let me bring that up again. I want to see. I've read a couple other of Larry's comments, and I'm curious. I think he's serious. Antifa fights against racism and fascism. I was at UC Berkeley in March. If any of you have been watching that long will remember this particular story. I was given a speech at UC Davis with Charlie Kirk, and the peaceful protesters smashed all of the windows and doors into the building. I was standing right there and trying to stop people from saying words, because that's effectively what we're doing there. The only thing that I'm doing on these campuses, the only thing that Charlie's doing on these campuses is saying words. When you come down to the fundamentals of what it is. Yes, we're making compelling arguments and doing this and that and the other thing. But at the end of the day, we're saying things. And a bunch of quote-unquote anti-fascists, Antifa, were there to make sure that we couldn't say things. So in the world and in an episode where we talk a lot about definitions and how to define things, you can't call yourself an anti-fascist and do all of the things that fascists do. That's why, Larry, I was hoping that this was satire, but judging by some other comments you had on here, I think it is not. You know what? That'll do it for today. We had a rough morning getting started in some technological stuff, so maybe we'll just kind of cut it off there because I don't want to bump into anything else going on later on in the day. Oh, dang it! There's some. This person commented back with a bunch of other a big long thing that I'm not going to read on the air, but I'll read it afterward and just kind of see here. Again, words have meanings, and we can't just continue to let people redefine what those meanings and those words are, and then call us bad people for thinking, for misunderstanding their definition of what that word means. So there's that. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Just type in JOPOB pretty much anywhere. You'll be able to find me. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all of those things. You'll be able to find me there. Yeah. See you tomorrow. Same time, same place. God bless America.